If we're talking about the price of corn, things have definitely been improving lately. When I talked this morning with David Gibson, Executive Director of Texas Corn Producers, the December futures contract was at 390, about 70 cents better than where it was at one point back in August. As we go to my conversation with David for an update on the Texas High Plains corn situation, he's sharing his thoughts on what's generated the price run up.
I think, James, what I think we're seeing is that, our domestic demand, feed yards, livestock sector, all are full. We've seen a little bit of pickup in the ethanol use as well, and we're certainly seeing, some buying from some foreign markets coming in, and overall, it's affected the demand on corn, and it's showing up in the market.
Right, and here locally, are we seeing our corn growers getting good buys from feedlots?
It's going good. The local cash basis in the Texas Panhandle right now is probably about as high as I've ever seen it that I can recall in recent history. With the demand, part of that's due to some shipment issues coming from out of the Midwest. Some of it due to just the demand right now at this time, and we're seeing a lot of our local corn go into silage this time instead of going into the cash market. So that's probably been another difference that we're seeing this year.
So in other words, getting a good amount of buying from both feedlots and dairies.
Yes.
So when you say basis is pretty strong right now, I know that can vary around the Texas High Plains region, but what generally would you say that basis is at right now?
Well, I know I have heard on the South Plains that there's some 95 cent over December bids for corn. So that's about 40 to 45 cents higher than normal. And I think that 40 to 45 cents is probably pretty typical across the whole High Plains as far as an improvement over a normal basis.
Okay, so we're seeing about 40 to 45 cents above what would be a normal basis.
Right.
And so maybe about a 90-cent basis overall compared to December futures.
That's probably, maybe on an average, that's what we're seeing here across the High Plains.
Wow, that is pretty phenomenal. As you say, we don't see it like this anywhere near commonly.
No, it's like I had a couple of farmers tell me it's kind of like we're getting a food corn premium right now just for a regular number 2 corn. That's kind of the basis we've seen on some food corn production in the past.
Yeah, so this is a pretty dramatic turnaround from where things were. At these current prices, are farmers now able to get above break-evens?
Well, it's got them at a spot that's making them more economically viable, and right at some of those break-even prices. The big question comes to how much had they sold or locked in, as this market's come up before we got to these levels that we're at currently. But, in general, I think most people, bulk of them are reaping some benefit out of this improved market.
Excellent. Well, that's very, very good to hear. In terms of the big price upswing that we've had, I know there can be all kinds of factors. Do you think feed has been, though, maybe the big factor here of late?
Well, I think it's been several factors. 2 weeks ago we had a report come out USDA that showed some increased usage and increase in exports, increase in some production, and that kind of triggered the rally in my mind. And as we're moving forward and coming up with a report later this week, it's predicted we'll see some further potential cutbacks in national production and some more increase in demand, ultimately lowering some stocks. So, we're kind of saying where it looks like we ought to see a run up in the market a little more. Just hopefully we haven't had it all done prior to getting the rest of the good news, so to speak, and pullback instead of some continued price gains.
All right. Well, now let's talk about the harvest of corn here on the Texas High Plains. Where are we at, let's say, in terms of the pace of harvest, and what are we seeing coming out of the fields?
Well, to this point, in general, we've had no reports of any real quality issues. I've seen some pretty good test weights. I think some of the yields have been a little less than people had hoped for, but when we think back to all that heat we had during the summer, that really put pressure on pollination and grain field. So that could be a factor that's leading to some of the yields being averaged a little bit below. We're seeing a rapid harvest with the open weather that we've had. It's just, I know I've already talked to some folks on the North Plains in the Dumas area that's totally completed their harvest, while others still have a good ways to go. But it's just really early to talk to some of these guys that said, we're 2 to 3 weeks ahead of normal on our harvest schedule. So that's, I think, pretty indicative. And I think part of that goes to this real open, dry weather that we've had.
Yeah, that has certainly been favorable, undoubtedly so. So, as you say, though, maybe a little bit of a little bit in the way of lower than hoped for yields, and you think heat was the primary factor there?
I think it was the heat and the dryness, and it put pressure on our irrigation systems, and we're really in a spot with most of our irrigation on the High Plains where it's a supplemental irrigation, and this time we didn't have any rainfall for it to supplement. Now, as we get to a few of the northern counties had some beneficial rains, and I've been hearing some better yields there in general than I've heard as we've come, say, that more towards the I-40 area going south. And that's pretty well shown when we look at the drought maps that have been released. That's where the drought intensity's been higher all year, south of I-40.
Absolutely. So, generally speaking, then, what would you say you're hearing in the way of yields, and what would that compare to normally?
I think, probably when we get done with this total harvest, we'll just be an average crop across the High Plains. I'm hoping and still hearing some reports, some of these counties in the northern tier that caught some rainfall, that their yields are running some above average. So hopefully that'll kind of average out across the area. That doesn't bring certain producers up to average, but as we look at the overall picture, that's what I think we're going to wind up seeing, James.
All right. So average production. Well, what is roughly an average yield?
For up here, we would average somewhere around the 200 bushels, 220 bushels per acre. We've got some areas that can go, some counties, certain farms can go close to 300, and some that can only do 150 to 180. So, but we put it all together, it's usually in that 200 to 210, 20 bushels across the whole High Plains region.
All right. So, it seems then right now, farmers, at least at the moment, they've got to be feeling better than they were maybe even just 2 months ago.
Well, from a price standpoint, I think so. And then as we look at options for next year with this run-up, there's some chances, if the basis remains strong, to see some prices that will be very tempting to do some marketing into, as they're starting to make some planning decisions for 21. So, I think in general there should be some reason for some optimism looking at these markets.
Yeah, do you think these markets could then invite maybe possibly an acreage increase in our area?
I don't think so, James. I think we're kind of tied to being able to produce the corn that our water will support from an irrigation standpoint. So with that in mind, I'm not looking at any, even with the run up in the market, a big switch in acreage.
Okay, so prices that could be good for making some marketing decisions, but not necessarily we're gonna see more planting. Okay.
Right. I just don't see I mean, we've got to stay pretty diversified and utilize crops for most of our producers where they can utilize their water in a very effective manner and not be overextended when we get dry spells like we've suffered through this year.
All right. Well, as always, David, you give me great answers to the questions I ask you, but is there anything else that maybe you'd like to note before we close?
Well, I would remind growers that the sign up for the CFAP 2 programs are underway. They'll need to be contacting their local FSA offices, and in general, they're getting on a waiting list for when they can be able to get with the staff there to get signed up for that program. This round is it appears that it's going to be real simple for the sign up. It's basically being pulled from their reported acreage to FSA for planted using their insurance yields. And there are a few hiccups with some ways insurance was signed up on some farms, but FSA is working rapidly to get that resolved. But, growers just need to be aware that that's out there and get in and get signed up for it in a timely manner. There's a lot of things going on in FSA offices. There's livestock feed programs. There's the CFAP. A lot of paperwork going on through FSA. So please work with your local offices and get in and be timely and understand that the situation we're in, where they're still not open for business, but just taking appointments and getting this done as rapidly as they can.
And I certainly thank David Gibson of Texas Corn Producers for spending some time with me for that update, and I thank you for visiting jameshuntag.com.